Hi, welcome to the Revive Ministries podcast. Today we begin a discussion on remembering our wellness, a tribute to Mental Health Awareness Month. We as humans have an incredible capacity to forget a lot of things. Just look at the calendar. Everything is marked so as for us to remember. And a lot of times, sometimes we remember because we have to remember because they are sometimes the most sensitive things in our lives. The highs and lows in life can be brutal, but at the same time, we have today two guests. I'm very excited. We have Richard Marquis and Mike Jones. Michael Jones is returned here. He's been here for returning guest for a while. We have Richard, which I'm really happy and excited to come and share his insight on this subject of remembering our wellness. Welcome, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you for being willing to, talk about. I always say with my guests that it's hard to share sometimes the hardest things, and these hard things are because of the people behind them. I've been a peer myself for over 2 decades. I was a U.S. Air Force veteran, and it's hard to talk about these sensitive things because it's not about just numbers or facts, it's the people behind them. So I just want to appreciate your insight and you guys being willing to share a little bit and us while we try to remember this important month. Before we begin, I want to share a disclaimer. If you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help. The crisis hotline in the U.S. is 1-800-273-8255. It's National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. One little thread I want to throw out there is resources, and the lack of them is a lot of times at the center of this need to remember mental health and on this month. So before we begin, Mike knows this, but I start off with a quote. I always say that people say it better than I do. So I want you to listen to the quote and hold on, let me just go there. I want you to listen and actually answer this question. How does this quote reach you personally? And what lessons do you think we can learn from them? So Mike, I'm going to have you share first. It says, everyone needs a house to live in, but a supportive family is what builds a home. Anthony Lacombe. So, Mike.
Well, I view that quote as a really good quote because there's another quote I like. A house is not a home unless love is involved.
Yeah.
And you could have a house to live in and have your needs taken care of, but if you don't have that family support, and sometimes it's not our blood family, sometimes it could be our friends or neighbors, and they could give us that support we really need because it takes a village to raise a child sometimes, and even when we're at our adult stage, we still need the village to help us out, and not kick us out. So,
our connections.
That's what I think.
Yeah, our connections do matter a lot more than we'd like to admit. How about you, Richard? What's your take on this quote?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me here. And yes, this is tough stuff to talk about, but that's what we've got to do. In dealing with our son's schizophrenia for the past 13 years, this quote that you just quoted could not be more true. Family support is everything, and I do mean everything. Without our family working together, we would not have had the favorable outcome that we are enjoying today. When we visited our son in a state mental hospital, I immediately noticed that we were the only visitors in the visitation room. When I asked the supervisors there, was that normal, was that average? And they said, yes, of the 1,000 patients they had in this hospital, 95% of them had no family support whatsoever. Sometimes months they would go without a visitor. They said it was like these poor souls had been thrown away. That is why many say they have 3 choices of where to live: on the street, in the woods, or jail. Where we live, there's a very large population of homeless in the woods near town. And estimates are that at least 35% of them suffer from some form of mental illness. But this reality must be faced. Not all families are equipped to deal with chronic mental illness, either emotionally or financially. And that is why we, as a society, are going to have to fill that void. It is our job to fill that void.
I appreciate your insight. Just it's a cold hard fact that there's many of them that really don't have a physical home. But not only that, like Mike mentioned, that a lot of times you may have a home, but it's not the right home. Like it's not the supportive home that can handle the strain of serious mental illness or something that needs a lot of care. So it is uniquely challenging for all the family, not only the person handling it. And when we talk about family, there's many different types of family in life. And like Mike mentioned, that sometimes they're not even blood related. Sometimes I know people who've been on this podcast who didn't have the most savory upbringing or didn't have the best cards dealt to them per se. But you make do. I remember remembering our wellness when I was thinking about this, when I initially was thinking about Mental Health Month, means different things for different people, especially when it comes to a peer. I'm a peer myself, but also it means differently for the parents. Remembering wellness is something else. I want to ask both Michael and Richard, and I'll share a little bit about myself. Could you share what remembering our wellness means to you both, specifically on why you think it's important? Michael, I'll go to you first.
The thing about wellness that people sometimes forget is wellness is an ever-long journey. You could be well one day, then the next day something could come up and you're not okay. Then you could, fight through it and be well again. And on the road to recovery, we have to remember this is going to be for the rest of our lives. And I know as a peer that could seem, frustrating sometimes, but I feel for the parents and the caregivers and the people who care about us the most, because they don't understand why we can't just be normal. And to them, a lot of times I tell them normal is, is relevant to different people for different things. Some people's normal may be abnormal to other people. But if we remember the wellness and we work on our coping skills or wellness tools, and we strive to do everything in our power, whether it be medication, whether it be therapy, whether it be the support of our family, we have to remember that we are on this journey to wellness with other people. And even if like I said before, our personal family doesn't help us, we still should strive to have somebody in our lives and make the connections where we could have that person that's there at the end to say, you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And if not, that could be a struggle for people.
Yeah. I like what you said, though. It is a journey, and that recovery is different for each individual and each family. And I feel, for one, that's an interesting topic, because when we talk about remembering wellness, there's a lot of uncertainty. I remember when I first got my onset, a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know what was next. And value kind of gets tied into that. But I want to hear from Richard, your take on this question. Remembering wellness means different for different, why do you think it's important primarily?
I was talking to a recovering drug addict at a church social, and they are always recovering. He made what I thought was one of the most profound statements I've ever heard. Quote, "The difference between religion and spirituality is religion is for those people who don't want to go to hell. Spirituality is for those people who have already been to hell and don't want to go back. People ask me what it's like dealing with the pain of our son's schizophrenia. I tell them, unless they've been through it, you can't imagine it. The same reality applies to me, though. As for understanding what our son is enduring, I know I am incapable of imagining it without actually enduring it myself. Families have to understand what our loved ones are enduring, and our job to help keep them from going back to hell of what they've been through.
Thank you, Richard. That is unfortunately more true. Like, we have more things to relate to when it comes to pain, when it comes to suffering, than we do sometimes cross culturally. And one thing that I remember from my own experience when it comes to wellness and remembering it is, um, it's a journey. It's sometimes, labels, when it comes to diagnosis, are important, but it doesn't define who the person is. My name is Robert before I am what my mental illness, just like Mike is Michael before anything else. And for me, I think that's very important because it helps me remember why mental health is important, because it's the people behind it, it's the families attached to it, it's each one of us sharing, because it's one of those things that sometimes we feel invisible. At least I did as a peer. Invisible because no one would bother to understand or take the time. But at the same time, having support and having this remembering moment and marking the calendar on May is very vital because of this and for many other reasons. Anyway, I want to kind of, Richard and Michael, regarding Mental Health Awareness Month, and you touched on it, Richard, before, but what else do you want to expand? What do you feel society should be aware of and remember when it comes to mental health today? Michael, I'll have you go first.
The one valuable thing that I think people forget sometimes, you touched on it earlier, is there are faces behind the disorder and behind the problem. It's not just so and so has schizophrenia or so and so has, bipolar. That's a real person. And a lot of people in society don't connect if they don't have it personally or know someone who deals with it. And like we've been talking about, if you haven't dealt with it yourself or been put in a position where your life view has been challenged, and some people, when the challenge comes, they overcome it. But other people, when the challenge comes, they fold. And we don't want to be like the people that fold, because when we fold, nothing but bad happens. And we get stuck in that personal hell.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's hard to come out. And if you don't have the right support and you don't remember, wellness tools and coping skills and have a network, and you have to take a holistic approach to it.
Yeah.
And I like to say, sometimes to have a healthy mind, you also need a healthy body. To have a healthy body, you need a healthy mind. And you also need to have some sort of, I wouldn't say spiritual, but some sort of something, some hope, whether it be faith-based or whether it be, you have, hope in humanity. We all need some kind of hope. And working with NAMI, that's one of our biggest principles. In fact, it is our biggest principle of never giving up hope. We will never. Okay.
I like what you said about there has to be hope, but there has to be some sort of purpose. And I used to say this with the peers in the support group, Mike, and as a facilitator with you, is life is there's situations when we have crisis, and crisis situations are appropriate that you need to either go to a hospital. But life is best. You want safety, you want comfort, you want all these things, but life is best lived, and maintaining it is good, but it can't be all of it. There has to be some joy. There has to be something else besides me just making sure I should. If life is a bunch of shoulds, it takes out the substance of the purpose and what you're kind of getting at, Mike. So with that being said, I had a little technical issue before, but I think we're good right now. So Richard, would you mind sharing your thoughts on this question?
Very much so. As you know, I've been published over 40 times in the editorial sections of major newspapers on this fight for mental health. For my message to society, I will answer with a quote from one of my previous editorials on stigma. While flying combat missions over North Vietnam, when people were going down around me, people I knew, I would think, there, but for the grace of God go I. I have a recommendation to all parents hearing this telecast. If you have not been forced to deal with mental illness, you need to thank God every day your family has not had to endure this nightmare. Quite frankly, you are the ones who should be thinking to yourselves, there, but for the grace of God go I. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to hold the course for those who so desperately need us. That's my message to society. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard and Michael, for sharing your insight. Any final thoughts that both of you would like to share with those listening today? Michael, why don't you go?
The one thing that I would like to leave people with is life is not about where you've been. It's about where you want to go. So if you have a purpose or you have hope, that'll lead you on the road to success and to maintain a stable recovery, because it's a long journey to the end.
How about you, Richard? What would you like to say?
I'd like to quote Jack London, the author, who had a very good quote for the situation we're in. Quote, life is not always a matter of holding good cards, but sometimes handling a poor hand well. We have been dealt a tough hand. We fight it well as we can. Thank you for having me.
Again, thank you, Richard and Michael. I know it's not easy. I just want to share with those listening that if you want to stay updated with Revive Ministries through its various platforms, reviveministriesfl.com. I also want to share this last quote as we wrap things up, and it's from Martin Luther King Jr. It says, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Till next time, this is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast. Thanks for listening.